After I sold my business for $32 million, I hosted a celebration. Right before the toast, I noticed my daughter-in-law slip something into my wine. When everyone turned away, I secretly exchanged glasses with her father. Minutes later, he began to. Can you imagine selling your life's work for $32 million, dreaming of finally enjoying freedom and retirement, only for your own son to march into your office, demand a huge chunk of it, and then try to poison you at your own celebration party? Believe me, I couldn't either. But that's exactly what happened to me, Lester King, a man who built an empire from nothing, only to face betrayal from the one person I thought I could always trust. Dennis's fist crashed onto my mahogany desk, making the signed contracts jump. $5 million. That's what I need, and I need it now. I looked up from the documents spread before me, my hand still gripping the pen I'd used to sign away 32 years of my life. The ink was barely dry on the sale agreement. $32 million. Freedom. Retirement. A new chapter. Dennis, I just sold the company. I can finally retire. And that's perfect, Dad. His eyes gleamed with something I'd never seen before, a raw, undisguised hunger. Now you can help your son. $5 million. I've got debts to cover, and I want to start my own business. Wendy stood by the door, her calculating gaze shifting between Dennis and the contracts on my desk. She gave a slight nod when Dennis glanced her way, a silent signal I almost missed. You didn't even congratulate me. The words came out harder than I intended. This is the biggest day of my life, and you march into my office demanding money. I'm congratulating you now. Dennis leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. $32 million is incredible. So what's $5 million to you? It's nothing. Nothing? I'd started King Technologies in this very room when Dennis was barely walking. I'd worked 18-hour days, missed school plays and baseball games, built something from scratch while raising him alone after his mother died. Dennis, you have no idea what this money represents. I gathered the contracts protectively. This is my security, my retirement. I've earned this. And I'm your son. His voice cracked like a teenager, though he was 38 years old. I deserved something for all those years you were working instead of being a father. The accusation hit like cold water. Wendy stepped closer, her voice honey-sweet. Maybe we could discuss this more calmly. Dennis just thinks it would be wonderful if you could help us get started. Started? Dennis had been getting started for 15 years. Different jobs, different schemes, always needing money. And since marrying Wendy 3 years ago, those needs had grown exponentially. Come to the party tomorrow night. I stood, tucking the contracts into my desk drawer. Bring Wendy's parents. We'll celebrate properly. I'll explain my plans for retirement. Maybe discuss how I can help you both responsibly. Responsibly? Dennis's laugh was bitter. You mean like a loan with terms and interest? I mean like family who cares about each other's future. Wendy whispered something in Dennis's ear. His face hardened. If you don't help us now, don't expect to sit at your party. Dennis straightened his jacket with sharp, angry movements. And don't expect us for Sunday dinners or holidays either. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I watched my son transform into someone I barely recognized. Gone was the boy who used to sit on my lap during late-night work sessions, asking about business and dreaming of joining the company someday. That would be your choice, not mine. I kept my voice steady. The party starts at 7. Your decision. Dennis turned toward the door, then spun back. His fist slammed the desk again, harder this time. A coffee mug jumped and spilled across quarterly reports. You're making a mistake, old man. We're your family. We deserve that money more than some savings account. Wendy placed her hand on his arm, but her eyes never left mine. Come on, honey. Let's give your father time to think about what really matters. They walked out together, Dennis's shoulders rigid with anger, Wendy's heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I heard their voices in the hallway, sharp and urgent. Wendy's words were too quiet to catch, but her tone was clear, planning mode. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Through my office blinds, I watched Dennis rev his BMW unnecessarily loud before peeling out of the driveway. Wendy sat in the passenger seat, her phone already pressed to her ear. I sank back into my chair, staring at the coffee stain spreading across financial projections I'd never need again. 30 years of building something meaningful, and my own son saw it as nothing more than a lottery ticket with his name on it. The contracts felt heavier when I pulled them out again. $32 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of as a young father working in this cramped home office, Dennis sleeping upstairs in his racing car bed. Where had I gone wrong? When had my son learned to see family as leverage instead of love? The coffee stain had soaked through 3 layers of reports by the time I stopped staring at it. My hands trembled slightly as I moved the documents to dry ground. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the lawn where Dennis used to play catch with his grandfather. When did he become so entitled, so calculating? I remembered Dennis at 8 years old, proudly carrying my briefcase from the car to the office. Dad, when I grow up, I want to help you run the company. His gap-toothed smile had made every 18-hour day worth it. That boy would have cheered about the sale, would have asked thoughtful questions about my retirement plans, would have hugged me before anything else. The phone rang. Jim Patterson, my oldest friend and business rival for 30 years. Lester, I heard the news through the grapevine. 32 million. You magnificent devil. Jim's laughter filled the office. I suppose you're having a celebration tomorrow night at 7? Can you and Martha make it? I asked. Wouldn't miss it for the world. This calls for champagne. Real champagne. After hanging up, I felt slightly steadier. Real friends understood the significance of this moment. They'd watched me build King Technologies from nothing, survived the lean years, celebrated every milestone. The catering company answered on the second ring. Elegant Events. This is Susan. This is Lester King. I need everything perfect for tomorrow night's party. 50 guests, cocktails, and dinner. Money is no object. Wonderful, Mr. King. We've handled several of your corporate events. Should we prepare for any dietary restrictions? Just make sure there's plenty of everything. This is the most important celebration of my life. After confirming details with Susan, I called my attorney's office. The sale would take 30 days to finalize completely, but the contracts were ironclad. By Halloween, I'd be officially retired and wealthier than I'd ever imagined. The house felt different without Dennis's angry energy poisoning the air. Quieter, more like the home I'd loved for 25 years. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. Nothing fancy, just something to mark the moment properly. My phone buzzed. Dennis. I let it ring. 2 more calls followed in quick succession. Then a text, Dad, we need to talk. This is important. Important to whom? Everything had always been important to Dennis when money was involved, his credit card bills, his car payments, his investment schemes that never panned out. But my achievements, my dreams, those had never seemed urgent enough for his attention. The wine tasted better than expensive champagne. I'd earned every sip through decades of careful decisions and calculated risks. Dennis wanted to waltz in and claim a windfall he'd played no part in creating. Another text arrived, Wendy's parents want to meet you before the party. Can we come by around 6 o'clock tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long time. Homer and Mae Thompson, retired teacher and homemaker from Wisconsin. I'd met them twice, both times briefly. Pleasant people, if a bit overwhelmed by their daughter's ambitions. Did they know about Dennis's demand? Were they part of whatever strategy Wendy was orchestrating? My reflection stared back from the kitchen window, looking older than I felt. 65 years old, finally successful enough to enjoy life, and my only child saw me as an ATM machine. The wine bottle was half empty when I made my decision. Tomorrow's party would happen exactly as planned. Friends who genuinely cared about my success would celebrate with me. If Dennis chose to stay away, that would reveal everything I needed to know about his priorities. I turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs. In my bedroom, I pulled out the guest list I'd been working on all week. 28 confirmed attendees so far. People who'd supported King Technologies through good times and bad. People who understood what 30 years of dedication actually meant. Dennis's name wasn't on that list. I hadn't added it because I'd assumed family would come automatically. Maybe it was time to stop assuming anything about my son. The family photo felt heavier than it should have when I lifted it from the mantel. Dennis at age 10, gap-toothed grin stretching from ear to ear, standing beside me at the King Technologies ribbon-cutting ceremony for our first real office building. His small hand gripped my larger one with absolute trust, a worship shining in his eyes. I settled into my leather armchair, studying that innocent face. When had admiration curdled into entitlement? When had Wendy, not entirely fair, perhaps? Dennis had shown signs of restlessness before meeting her, the job hopping, the get-rich-quick schemes, the gradual distancing from family traditions. But Wendy had crystallized those tendencies into sharp-edged ambition. I remembered their wedding 3 years ago. Dennis had been nervous, but genuinely happy. Wendy, stunning in white silk, had seemed perfect for him, smart, articulate, ambitious. During the reception, she'd approached me with a champagne flute and a calculating smile. "I hope you know how lucky you are to have Dennis," she'd said. "He's going to accomplish amazing things with the right support." The right support. Code for money. I realize now. Within 6 months of marriage, Dennis's financial requests had doubled: better apartment, newer car, investment opportunities that always seemed to require immediate cash infusions. Wendy's influence wrapped around him like expensive perfume, intoxicating and impossible to ignore. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered without checking the caller ID. "Dad." Dennis's voice carried none of today's aggressive edge. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot earlier." "Maybe. I was excited about your success. Sometimes I express things poorly." A pause. "Wendy thinks we should all sit down tomorrow before the party. Her parents are driving in specifically to meet you properly." Wendy thinks, not Dennis thinks. The distinction mattered. "The Thompsons are welcome tomorrow night," I said carefully, along with everyone else celebrating this milestone. "But Dad, we really need to discuss the financial situation privately first, as a family." Financial situation, as if my retirement planning was somehow their emergency. "Dennis, I'm not discussing money with you again until you demonstrate some basic respect for what I've accomplished." The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't soften them. Congratulations would be a good start. I did congratulate you. No, you demanded payment. Very different things. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Dennis sighed. "Fine. Congratulations on selling the company, Dad. I'm proud of what you built." The words sounded rehearsed, probably coached by Wendy. But I heard something genuine underneath. Maybe a trace of the boy who used to bring me crayon drawings of office buildings. "Thank you. That means more than you know." I softened my tone slightly. "The party starts at 7. Cocktails in the living room. Dinner at 8. Dress nicely. This is important to me. We'll be there." Another pause. "Dad, I really am sorry about earlier, the money talk. That wasn't how I meant to handle things." After hanging up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe Dennis could separate himself from Wendy's influence long enough to celebrate appropriately. Maybe family bonds could overcome financial greed. I walked to the kitchen and checked my party preparations. Susan from Elegant Events had confirmed everything: bartender, servers, chef, even flowers for the tables. 47 people had now confirmed attendance, more than I'd expected. The wine cellar yielded treasures I'd been saving for special occasions: a 1982 Bordeaux from the year I incorporated King Technologies, champagne from France, not the domestic stuff. Tonight called for the finest everything. In my study, I arranged the sale contracts in a leather portfolio. Some guests would want to see the actual documents, understand the scope of what I'd achieved. $32 million represented more than money. It was validation of every risk taken, every sacrifice made. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times. Soon, I'd need to rest, prepare for tomorrow's celebration. But first, I wanted to savor this moment of quiet accomplishment. Outside my window, the neighborhood settled into evening routines. Porch lights flickered on. Television screens glowed behind curtains. Normal families living normal lives. Probably never dreaming of the kind of success I'd achieved. Yet here I sat alone with my triumph, wondering why victory felt hollow. When your only child saw it as opportunity rather than achievement, tomorrow would tell the story. Either Dennis would remember how to be my son, or I'd finally understand that some relationships couldn't be forced. The contracts felt warm under my fingertips as I closed the portfolio. $32 million. Freedom. Independence. The power to choose who deserved my generosity and who had already revealed their true nature. For the first time all day, I smiled without reservation. The alarm jolted me awake at 8 sharp. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through bedroom curtains, promising perfect weather for tonight's celebration. My first thought wasn't about Dennis's apology call. It was about the 27 confirmed guests who deserved an unforgettable evening. Coffee brewing. I spread my handwritten checklist across the kitchen table: flowers from Millfield Gardens, wine selection from Romano's Fine Spirits, fresh oysters and imported cheeses from Delacqua Delicatessen. Everything had to be perfect. The morning air felt crisp against my face as I drove toward downtown. First stop, Romano's, where Vincent himself greeted me at the door. "Mr. King, I heard about your big sale." "Congratulations." His genuine enthusiasm warmed me more than yesterday's family drama had chilled me. "Vincent, I need your finest bottles for tonight's retirement celebration." I surveyed his premium section with new eyes. Money was no longer a constraint. It was a tool for creating joy. Price is truly no object. My friends supported me for 30 years. They deserve champagne that costs more than most cars. Vincent's eyebrows rose. 2 cases of Dom Perignon, 1996. 4 bottles of Chateau Margaux, 1995. Vincent loaded my trunk like he was handling crown jewels. $3,000 spent in 20 minutes, and I felt lighter with each purchase. Delacqua Delicatessen overwhelmed my senses: aged Parmesan, fresh herbs, smoked salmon arranged like artwork. The owner, Marcel, personally selected each item while recounting stories of famous celebrations he'd catered. Retirement. After building an empire. Marcel kissed his fingers. This calls for our finest everything. Back home, I found controlled chaos. Susan's catering team had transformed my terrace into something from a magazine spread. White linens draped tables that sparkled with crystal glasses. Soft lighting wound through garden trellises. The sound system played jazz at conversation volume. "Mr. King, we need your approval on the appetizer arrangement." Sarah, Susan's assistant, gestured toward artistic displays of food that looked too beautiful to eat. I tasted everything: crab cakes with subtle spice, chocolate-dipped strawberries that burst with sweetness. Each bite represented years of sacrifice finally paying dividends of pure pleasure. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. My hands stayed busy arranging personal touches Susan's team couldn't provide, family photos strategically placed where guests could see my journey from young father to successful entrepreneur. The signed contracts displayed in my study for anyone curious about actual deal terms. Afternoon flew past in a productive blur. Sound system tested. Check. Lighting adjusted for golden hour ambience. Check. Bathroom stocked with premium soap and towels. Check. Every detail mattered because tonight proved that success meant more than money in the bank. At 4 o'clock, I stood on my terrace, surveying the transformation. Elegant tables waited for animated conversations. The bar gleamed with premium spirits. Soft music drifted through speakers hidden among flowers. This was what $32 million could buy. Not just financial security, but the power to create beauty, to demand excellence, to have joy shared among people who'd earned their place at the table through loyalty and genuine affection. Dennis had demanded $5 million for personal debts. But this demonstrated how wealth should be used, with purpose, with gratitude, with joy. I checked my watch. 3 hours until the first guests arrived. Time for a shower, fresh clothes, and final preparations for the evening that would mark my transition from entrepreneur to gentleman of leisure. The contracts sat in their leather portfolio, waiting to be shared with friends who would understand their significance, not as lottery tickets demanding immediate payout, but as proof that dreams pursued with determination could indeed come true. The doorbell's first chime found me adjusting my tie in the hallway mirror. Deep breath. This was it. The celebration I'd dreamed about for years. Through the frosted glass, I could see Jim and Martha Patterson waiting on the porch. Lester. Jim's bear hug nearly lifted me off my feet. You magnificent devil. I still can't believe you pulled off that sale. Martha's warm smile carried 30 years of friendship. The house looks absolutely stunning. You've outdone yourself. Leading them through my transformed home felt like showing off a masterpiece. The terrace drew gasps of appreciation, candlelight dancing on crystal, flowers perfuming the evening air, jazz floating from hidden speakers. Vincent's finest champagne demands a proper toast later, I announced, gesturing toward the bar where Dom Perignon waited in silver buckets. Within minutes, more cars filled my driveway. Frank Morrison from the bank, still sharp at 72. Dr. Sarachin, who'd kept me healthy through countless stressful deals. My neighbors, the Costellos, who'd watched King Technologies grow from garage startup to acquisition target. 32 million. Frank whistled low. Remember when you couldn't qualify for a $50,000 line of credit? You've earned every penny, Sarah added, accepting champagne from the circulating server. Those 18-hour days finally paid dividends. Each arrival brought fresh waves of congratulations. Stories emerged, late nights when I'd called friends for advice, celebrations of smaller victories along the way, commiserations during lean years when success seemed impossible. The Richardsons from 3 houses down approached with genuine small-town pride. We always knew you'd make it big, Lester. You've been such an inspiration to our neighborhood. Our kids still talk about the computer camp you sponsored at their school. Mrs. Richardson added, you never forgot to give back. That comment stung pleasantly. I had given back, scholarships, community programs, quiet help for families facing hardship, real generosity based on genuine connection, not demanded handouts from entitled relatives. By 6:30, 28 guests circulated between terrace and garden. Conversations flowed like fine wine, retirement plans, travel dreams, investment strategies. These people understood that wealth carried responsibility along with privilege. The sale timing was brilliant, observed Mike Torres, my former lawyer. Market conditions couldn't have been more favorable. Pure luck, I demurred, though we both knew better. 30 years of careful positioning, strategic partnerships, and calculated risks had created the opportunity luck could favor. Catering staff moved seamlessly through the crowd, ensuring glasses stayed full and appetizer plates constantly replenished. Every detail clicked into place exactly as planned. This was how success should be celebrated, with gratitude, dignity, and people who'd supported the journey. Standing near the garden fountain, watching animated faces glow in candlelight, I felt complete satisfaction. Real friends appreciated effort over entitlement. They celebrated achievement instead of demanding shares. They understood that respect was earned through character, not inherited through DNA. Martha Patterson approached with knowing eyes. "You look happier than I've seen you in years, Lester." "Retirement suits me already." I raised my glass toward the gathering, surrounded by people who mattered most. The evening's magic was building toward my planned toast. A moment to acknowledge everyone who'd contributed to this success. But first, I wanted to savor this perfect scene. Elegant setting, meaningful conversations, genuine affection filling the air like expensive perfume. Then headlights swept across my driveway. A familiar BMW pulled into the last parking space. My hand tightened around the champagne flute as Dennis emerged from the driver's side, followed by Wendy in an elegant black dress. From the back seat came two older figures, her parents, dressed respectfully for what they believed was a family celebration. "Excuse me," I murmured to Martha, setting down my glass with careful control. Walking toward my front door, I caught fragments of party conversation floating behind me. Warm laughter, clinking glasses, the comfortable sounds of genuine celebration. Dennis stood on my porch with practiced humility. Wendy beside him, holding a small wrapped box. "Dad." Dennis's voice carried none of yesterday's aggressive demand. "I owe you a massive apology for yesterday's behavior." Homer Thompson stepped forward, silver-haired and dignified in his best suit. "Lester, congratulations on your well-deserved retirement. Dennis told us about this wonderful celebration. We're so grateful you included us." May added, her grandmother's warmth immediately genuine. "You've always been generous to our family." But my attention stayed fixed on Dennis. His eyes met mine directly, something that hadn't happened during yesterday's money demand. I was completely out of line. Dennis's words seemed rehearsed, but felt sincere. "Your success should be celebrated, not exploited. I've been under tremendous stress with work, but that's no excuse for my behavior toward you." Wendy moved closer, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Lester, Dennis felt terrible all night about how he spoke to you. We brought a small gift to show our appreciation for including us tonight." The wrapped box felt substantial in my hands. Expensive weight, suggesting thoughtful selection rather than last-minute guilt purchase. "You built something incredible over 30 years, Dennis continued. "I'm proud to be your son, and I should have said that first yesterday instead of," he gestured helplessly. "Instead of what I did say." Standing there in my doorway, surrounded by the sounds of friends celebrating my achievement, I felt the sharp edges of yesterday's hurt beginning to soften. Maybe Dennis could separate himself from whatever pressure had driven his desperate demand. Maybe family relationships could survive financial stress. "Thank you for coming." I stepped aside, gesturing them into my transformed home. "The party's just getting started." Homer whistled appreciatively at the elegant setup. "Dennis wasn't exaggerating about your beautiful home. This is magnificent." Leading them toward the terrace, I felt cautious optimism, replacing yesterday's disappointment. Perhaps Dennis had spent the night reflecting on his behavior. Perhaps Wendy had counseled patience over immediate gratification. Perhaps tonight could bridge the gap yesterday had torn open. "Lester, your decorations are absolutely stunning." Wendy's compliments seemed genuine as she surveyed candlelit tables and flower arrangements. "What an amazing way to celebrate your achievement." My friends welcomed the family arrivals with typical warmth. Jim Patterson shook hands enthusiastically with Homer, immediately diving into conversation about teaching careers. Martha engaged May in animated discussion about gardening techniques. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my son Dennis and his wife Wendy, plus Wendy's parents, Homer and May Thompson." The introduction felt natural, healing some invisible wound from yesterday's confrontation. Dennis moved through introductions with genuine grace, asking thoughtful questions about my friendships and business relationships. No mention of money, no hints about financial expectations, just a son appearing proud of his father's accomplishments. "Your father's been an inspiration to our entire community," Mrs. Richardson told Dennis warmly. "He never forgot to help others, even while building his own success." "That sounds exactly like Dad," Dennis replied, glancing my way with what looked like authentic admiration. Wendy positioned herself near the bar, charming the catering staff while offering to help refresh drinks. Her social skills impressed even my most discerning friends. She asked intelligent questions about retirement planning, showed genuine interest in family stories, played the perfect supportive daughter-in-law. "We should add chairs for the family," I told Susan's assistant, who quickly arranged additional seating at the main table. The party atmosphere shifted subtly with family inclusion, more complete. Somehow, as if the celebration had been waiting for these final pieces. Homer's teaching stories entertained the group. May's quiet wisdom complemented more assertive personalities perfectly. Standing back near the garden fountain, I watched this perfect scene unfold. Friends and family mingling naturally. Meaningful conversations flowing between generations. My achievements celebrated by everyone who mattered most. "This is exactly what I hoped for," I murmured to myself, watching Dennis laugh genuinely at one of Jim's business anecdotes. Maybe yesterday's conflict had been necessary, a clearing of air before true reconciliation. Maybe family bonds were stronger than momentary greed. Leading Dennis and his family toward the main seating area felt like completing a perfect picture. Homer immediately connected with Dr. Chen over shared stories about career transitions, while May charmed the Costellos with questions about their rose garden. "Dad, you should tell everyone about that European river cruise you're planning." Dennis's enthusiasm seemed genuinely infectious as he helped refresh drinks for nearby guests. The suggestion sparked immediate interest. Jim leaned forward with his characteristic grin. "Lester, you always said you'd see the Scottish Highlands when you retired." "First stop after the sale finalizes completely," I confirmed, accepting a fresh glass of wine from Dennis. "Scotland, then Ireland, maybe venture into Scandinavia." 30 years of 12-hour days earned you every mile of that adventure, Sarah added warmly. Wendy moved gracefully between guest groups. Her social skills, impressive even to my most discerning friends. She asked intelligent questions about my business relationships, showed genuine interest in retirement planning discussions, played the perfect supportive daughter-in-law role. "Sarah, Lester has told us so much about your friendship over the years," Wendy said, settling beside the doctor. "Dennis and I feel so grateful to be part of this celebration tonight." "Family celebrations are the best kind," Sarah replied. "This is exactly how success should be honored. With people who matter most." Dennis caught my eye across the terrace and raised his glass slightly, a son's salute to his father's achievement. The gesture erased lingering shadows from yesterday's confrontation. Whatever stress had driven his desperate money demand seemed resolved through tonight's genuine reconciliation. "I can't believe I almost missed celebrating this incredible accomplishment," Dennis told Jim during a conversation about business strategy. "My father built this company from absolutely nothing. Pure determination and vision." The pride in his voice sounded authentic, not the calculated flattery from yesterday, but real admiration for what I'd achieved. Maybe Wendy had helped him gain perspective on family priorities versus financial pressure. Homer raised his wineglass toward me. "Lester, 35 years teaching showed me what dedication looks like. But building a company from scratch, that's remarkable resilience." "The hardest part was believing it would work when everyone said technology consulting was too competitive," I reflected. "Persistence pays dividends, but it takes decades to see results." May nodded thoughtfully. "Wendy always said you were an inspiration, working so hard while raising Dennis alone after your wife passed." The comment touched something deep. These people understood sacrifice in ways Dennis had seemed to forget yesterday. Tonight felt like validation that my choices had been correct, family and friends recognizing effort over entitlement. "This terrace setup is absolutely stunning." Wendy complimented, her eyes scanning the elegant arrangement. You have such sophisticated taste. Everything looks magazine perfect. Susan's catering team deserves the credit, I admitted, though I did insist on personal touches. Family photos, the wine selection, flowers from my mother's favorite shop. Details matter for occasions like this. Wendy agreed. Memories should be beautiful. As twilight deepened, garden lights began twinkling like captured stars. The party reached that perfect rhythm where conversations flowed naturally. Laughter punctuated stories, and everyone seemed genuinely content. This was exactly what I envisioned when planning tonight's celebration. Dennis moved between groups effortlessly, sharing stories about my generosity over the years, expressing gratitude for lessons learned during his childhood. The son I remembered from happier times had returned, replacing yesterday's angry stranger. Your father sponsored computer camps for underprivileged kids every summer, Dennis told the Richardsons. I helped when I was old enough. He never publicized it. Just believed technology education could change lives. Such moments reminded me why family reconciliation mattered more than money. Dennis could have been part of this success story all along if he'd chosen patience over immediate gratification. My phone buzzed insistently against my chest. The caller ID showed my attorney's office number, probably final details about Monday's closing procedures. Excuse me, everyone, I announced, glancing around the perfect party scene. I need to take this call about some closing details. Please continue enjoying yourselves. Walking through the French doors into my living room, I pressed the phone to my ear while positioning myself by the large window overlooking the terrace. The caller was Harold Peterson, my closing attorney, with last-minute documentation questions. Lester, sorry to interrupt your celebration, but the buyer's bank needs confirmation on the wire transfer timing. Of course, Harold, Monday morning works perfectly for the final transfer. Through the window, I could see my guests continuing their animated conversations. The party flowing beautifully without me. The documentation has been filed with the state and the transition team starts Tuesday. Very smooth process overall. Dennis was engaging Jim and Frank in what looked like serious business discussion. His hands gesturing enthusiastically. Even from this distance, I could see the respect on their faces as he spoke about the company's future. I appreciate you handling these final details personally, Harold. This sale means everything to my retirement plans. Wendy moved casually toward the drink refreshment area, appearing to help maintain the hosting duties I temporarily abandoned. Such thoughtfulness. She was proving herself the ideal daughter-in-law I'd hoped Dennis would find. The buyer is impressed with your operational documentation. They're confident about the transition. Something caught my peripheral vision. Wendy had paused beside the drink table, her back to most of the guests, her hand moved to her pocket, retrieving something small. That's excellent news, Harold. My words died as I watched Wendy's movements more closely. She palmed something tiny, a small packet or envelope, while glancing around to ensure no one was watching her. Then, with practiced smoothness, she moved her hand over my wine glass. My breath stopped. A fine powder fell from the packet into my drink. Quick, deliberate, unmistakable. Lester, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. My voice sounded distant even to myself. Wendy was stirring my wineglass with a cocktail stirrer, dispersing whatever she'd added. Should we schedule a final call before the wire transfer Monday? Wendy pocketed the empty packet and stirrer, then moved away from the table with the same casual grace she'd approached. No one else had noticed. The guests remained absorbed in their conversations, completely unaware that someone had just poisoned my drink. Harold, I'm sorry, but something urgent has come up here. My hand trembled slightly, holding the phone. Can we finalize everything first thing Monday morning? Of course. Enjoy your celebration, Lester. You've earned it. Through the window, I watched Wendy rejoin the main conversation group. Her smile bright and natural. She positioned herself where she could observe the drink table while appearing engaged with other guests. My mind raced through the implications, the reconciliation, the apologies, the perfect daughter-in-law performance, all calculated manipulation leading to this moment. They weren't here to celebrate my success. They were here to ensure I didn't live to enjoy it. Dennis seemed genuinely unaware, still engaged in animated conversation with Jim. His reformation appeared authentic, which meant Wendy was operating without his knowledge. She'd used his legitimate guilt over yesterday's confrontation as cover for her own deadly plan. The wineglass sat innocently on the table, indistinguishable from any other drink at the party. But I knew what it contained now. One sip would be enough. Whatever poison she'd used was likely fast-acting and designed to mimic a heart attack or stroke, a wealthy 65-year-old man celebrating with alcohol. Who would question a sudden medical emergency? But she'd made one critical mistake. She hadn't realized I was watching. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to return to the party. The game had changed completely, but I held the advantage now. Wendy thought she was executing a perfect murder. Instead, she just revealed herself as the enemy I needed to defeat. Time to turn the tables on my would-be killer. Stepping back onto the terrace, I maintained the same warm smile I'd worn all evening, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Wendy glanced up as I rejoined the group, her eyes immediately tracking toward the drink table where my poison wine waited. "Everything settled with the closing details?" she asked with perfect innocence. "Just some final paperwork formalities," I replied, moving naturally toward my usual position. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday morning." The poison was invisible, odorless, probably tasteless. Professional grade, meant to simulate natural causes, but Wendy had underestimated her target. I'd survived 30 years in competitive business by staying 3 moves ahead of people trying to destroy me. "Lester, shouldn't we have a proper toast to your retirement?" Wendy's suggestion carried subtle urgency. "Everyone's been waiting to officially celebrate your success." Jim nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. This moment deserves champagne and speeches." "This seems like the perfect moment, with family and friends together," Wendy continued, building momentum. "Your wineglass is right there, ready for the toast." She was pushing toward the poisoning's execution with calculated pressure disguised as party enthusiasm. Every word designed to get that glass to my lips quickly. "Excellent idea," I agreed readily. "But first, Dennis and Wendy, could you help me with something in the kitchen? I want to get that special bottle of Dom Perignon we discussed. The 1996 vintage and the good crystal champagne flutes for the proper ceremony." Dennis straightened with obvious pleasure at being included in the preparation. "Of course, Dad, you know where everything's stored better than we do." "This will make the toast even more special," I added, making the request sound important, like host-like family involvement in the celebration setup. As they headed inside together, I turned to Homer with practiced casualness. "Homer, how are you adjusting to retirement from teaching? 35 years in education. That's remarkable dedication." Homer's eyes lit with the enthusiasm educators always showed discussing their careers. "Well, the transition has been fascinating. After 3 decades of September schedules, I'm still adjusting to flexible time." While he spoke, gesturing expressively about retirement challenges, I moved closer to the drink table. Homer's wineglass sat inches from mine. Similar shape, identical red wine, close enough positioning for a quick exchange. "Have you and May thought about traveling?" I continued, keeping him engaged while scanning guest positions. Jim was deep in conversation with Frank about market trends. Sarah and May discussed garden planning. The other guests were naturally absorbed in their own discussions. No one was watching the drink table. "Oh yes, we've been planning a trip to visit national parks," Homer continued enthusiastically. "Yellowstone first, then maybe the Grand Canyon." In one smooth motion, I switched the glasses. Homer's untainted wine moved to my usual position. My poisoned glass shifted to his spot. The exchange took 3 seconds and looked like natural table rearrangement during conversation. That sounds wonderful. The Western parks are spectacular this time of year, I replied, stepping slightly away from the table as Homer continued his story about retirement planning. My pulse gradually steadied as the immediate danger passed. Wendy's poison now waited in Homer's glass instead of mine. The sweet irony of using her own father as an unknowing shield felt perfectly appropriate. Dennis and Wendy emerged from the kitchen carrying the Dom Perignon and crystal flutes, their faces bright with anticipation of the coming celebration. Everything's ready for the proper toast, Dennis announced, setting the champagne bottle on the table with ceremony. Wendy's gaze immediately moved to the drink table, confirming that my wine glass remained in position. Her satisfied smile revealed complete confidence in her planned success. Perfect timing, I declared, moving toward my switched glass while watching Wendy's expectant face. Let's make this toast memorable. She positioned herself to observe my drinking, eager to witness the poison's effects. Her father sat beside his deadly glass, completely unaware that his daughter had just tried to murder his host, using him as an unwitting accomplice. Everyone, please gather around, I called out, raising the glass that should have killed me. The irony was exquisite. Wendy thought she was watching her victim approach death, when she'd actually just set up her own father for the fate she'd intended for me. Time for the evening's real entertainment to begin. Everyone gathered expectantly around the elegantly set table, glasses raised in anticipation of my retirement speech. The moment felt perfect. Candlelight dancing on crystal. Friends and family united in celebration. The soft evening air carrying the promise of new beginnings. Friends, this truly is the most meaningful evening of my life. I stood confidently, commanding attention, while internally preparing for the drama about to unfold. 30 years of building something from nothing, and here I am, surrounded by people who matter. Your friendship and support have made this success possible, I continued, scanning faces that had supported me through decades of struggle. Tonight, I want to talk about loyalty, about trust, about what family really means. The shift in my tone caught some attention. Jim raised an eyebrow, sensing something different in my usual speech pattern. I've learned that not everyone who claims to love you actually does. My gaze moved deliberately toward Wendy, whose confident smile faltered slightly. Some people see success and think only of what they can take from it. Dennis leaned forward, confused by the growing tension in what should have been a celebratory moment. The other guests exchanged glances, uncertain where this speech was heading. Unfortunately, not everyone here tonight shares that genuine affection. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over the silent gathering. In fact, someone at this very table tried to poison me just minutes ago. Shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Wendy's face went white, her eyes darting between me and the drink table as she tried to process how her plan had gone wrong. "Homer, stop!" I shouted as he raised his wine glass toward his lips. "Don't drink that wine. It contains poison." Homer froze mid-motion, the glass trembling inches from his mouth. Around the table, guests recoiled in horror, several setting down their own drinks in alarm. "What are you talking about?" Dennis stood up, his voice cracking with confusion. "Dad, what's going on?" "Wendy, would you like to explain what you put in my wine glass?" I turned to face her directly, my voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "I saw you add something from a small packet while I was taking that phone call inside." "That's absolutely ridiculous." Wendy's voice pitched higher with panic. "Why would I poison anyone? This is insane." But her face betrayed everything. The color draining from her cheeks, her hands trembling as she gripped the back of her chair, her eyes calculating escape routes, even as she protested innocence. "You looked around to make sure no one was watching," I continued relentlessly. "You stirred it in, then pocketed the evidence immediately afterward." Dennis stared at his wife with growing horror. "Wendy, tell him he's wrong. Tell everyone this is some kind of mistake." Of course, it's a mistake, she snapped, but her voice carried desperation now. Lester, you must have seen something else. I was just helping with the drinks. Homer still held the poisoned glass, staring at it with dawning understanding of how close he'd come to death. May clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. Fine, I said calmly. Let's settle this scientifically. We'll take that wine to a laboratory for analysis. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize publicly to everyone here. If I'm right, I reach toward Homer's glass, this will prove attempted murder. Let me just secure this evidence. Wendy lunged forward with sudden desperation, her calculated facade cracking completely. You can't. She stumbled against the table leg with theatrical clumsiness, her hand striking the wineglass. Crystal shattered against stone. Red wine splashed across the terrace. Evidence destroyed in one accidental moment. Oh no! Wendy gasped, her performance unconvincing. I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Dennis stared at his wife with undisguised suspicion. How convenient. I said quietly, and everyone understood exactly what they'd witnessed. The shattered glass caught candlelight like scattered diamonds on the stone terrace. Wendy knelt beside the mess, making a show of trying to clean up while avoiding everyone's accusatory stares. That was no accident, Wendy. I stood over her, my voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. You destroyed the evidence because you knew exactly what that laboratory analysis would reveal. I don't have to listen to these wild accusations. She shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking completely. Mascara streaked down her cheeks as panic replaced calculation. This is ridiculous. Dennis stepped between us, but his voice lacked conviction. Dad, maybe there's some explanation, the explanation is simple. I kept my eyes fixed on Wendy's guilty face. Your wife came here tonight to murder me for my money. She used your genuine reconciliation as cover for attempted homicide. That's a lie. Wendy's voice rose to near hysteria. Dennis, are you going to let him talk about me this way? But Dennis was staring at his wife with dawning recognition. The money demanded yesterday. You pushed me to ask for $5 million. You said we deserved it immediately. You needed help with your debts. Wendy snapped, then caught herself, revealing too much. What debts? Homer asked quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment. Wendy, what have you done? Jim stepped forward, his lawyer instincts engaged. Lester, what exactly did you witness? I saw her add powder from a small packet into my wineglass while I was on the phone inside. She stirred it in, looked around to ensure no one noticed, then pocketed the evidence. I gestured toward the broken glass. When I offered laboratory testing, she immediately destroyed the proof. Sarah nodded grimly. The timing of that accident was remarkably convenient. Wendy's eyes darted between the faces surrounding her. Guests who moments before had welcomed her warmly, now looking at her with disgust and suspicion. Even Dennis was stepping back, creating physical distance as emotional distance grew. We don't have to stay here and be insulted. She grabbed her purse from a nearby chair. Her movements sharp with desperation. Dennis, we're leaving now. Wendy, wait. Dennis looked torn between wife and father, but the evidence was overwhelming. Maybe we should explain. There's nothing to explain because I didn't do anything wrong, but her voice carried the shrill edge of trapped guilt. Come on, we're going home. She stalked toward the house, her high heels clicking angrily against stone. Dennis followed reluctantly, glancing back with an expression of confused shame. Dad, I don't know what to say. The truth would be a good start, I replied, but not unkindly. When you're ready to hear it. Homer and May remained frozen by the drink table, their faces etched with heartbreak and humiliation. Around us, party guests murmured among themselves, processing the dramatic revelation that had shattered what should have been a perfect celebration. Car doors slammed in the driveway with finality. An engine roared to life, revved unnecessarily loud in an expression of frustrated rage. Tires squealed against asphalt as Dennis's BMW disappeared into the night, carrying away the criminals who had tried to destroy my retirement before it began. But Homer and May stayed behind, their shoulders bowed with shame, facing the wreckage of what they believed was their daughter's happy marriage to a successful man. The broken glass crunched under my feet as I moved to comfort them. Because unlike their daughter, these were good people caught in circumstances beyond their control. "I'm so sorry," Homer whispered, his voice breaking. "We had no idea she was capable of something like this." Justice had been served, but now came the harder task of healing the wounds that betrayal always leaves behind. Silence stretched across the terrace like a heavy blanket, broken only by the distant sound of Wendy's car disappearing into the night. Broken glass sparkled among scattered drops of poison wine, evidence of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed everything. Homer stood motionless, still processing how close he'd come to death at his own daughter's hands. May dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her quiet sobs carrying decades of parental heartbreak. "We are so deeply sorry, Lester." Homer's voice trembled with shame and gratitude. "You saved my life tonight. We failed as parents somehow. This is our responsibility." "Homer, May, look at me." I moved closer, placing a gentle hand on the older man's shoulder. "This is not your fault. You are good, decent people. Wendy made her own choices." "But we must have missed something," May whispered. "Some sign that she could do such a terrible thing." "Evil sometimes wears a perfect mask," Sarah said softly, joining our small circle. "None of us suspected her true nature until tonight." Jim approached with a small brush and dustpan, already helping clean up the shattered evidence. "Lester, your quick thinking saved Homer's life. How did you figure out what was happening?" "Pure chance," I admitted. "I was by the window taking a business call when I saw her add something to my wine. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing." "You handled that situation with incredible grace," Frank Morrison added, his banker's instincts appreciating strategic thinking under pressure. "Most people would have panicked or confronted her immediately." Other guests gradually joined our conversation, their initial shock transforming into admiration for how I'd protected an innocent man while exposing a murderer. The catering staff quietly replaced broken items and brought fresh glasses, helping restore order to chaos. "I keep thinking about how she encouraged that toast," Martha Patterson observed with a shudder. "She was eager to watch you drink poison." "But she underestimated Lester's intelligence," Dr. Chin replied. "And now, Homer and May are safe. That's what matters most." Homer raised his new glass toward me, his hand steadier now. "To a man who proved that good can triumph over evil, even within families." "To Lester." The group echoed, their voices carrying genuine warmth and respect. But I raised my own glass toward Homer and May instead, to people who show grace under impossible circumstances. "Homer and May, you are welcome in my life always. Tonight taught me the difference between family you're born with and family you choose." My tears shifted from sadness to gratitude. "We don't deserve your kindness after what our daughter tried to do." "Your daughter's choices reflect her character, not yours," I replied firmly. "You stayed when she ran. You faced truth when she chose lies. That tells me everything I need to know about your hearts." As the evening progressed, conversations gradually returned to celebration. The attempted murder became a story of justice served, friendship proven, and wisdom rewarded. Homer shared memories of my generosity over the years, painting a picture of consistent character that made Wendy's betrayal even more shocking by contrast. "You sponsored those computer camps every summer," Homer told the other guests. "Never wanted credit. Just believed technology education could change lives." "That's the Lester we know," Jim confirmed. Success never changed his values. By 10 o'clock, the last guests were departing with promises to stay connected during my retirement. Homer and May insisted on helping with final cleanup, their way of contributing something positive after their daughter's destructive act. Standing on my terrace as they finished clearing tables, I surveyed the scene of my triumph. Justice had been served without legal complications. An innocent man had been protected. Toxic relationships had been severed cleanly. Most importantly, my retirement was beginning with absolute clarity about which relationships deserved my time and which people had earned their place in my chosen family. The contracts for my $32 million sale sat safely in my study, waiting to fund adventures with people who valued me for reasons beyond money. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, free from manipulation and false loyalty. Tonight had proven that wisdom, patience, and quick thinking could defeat even the most calculated evil. And sometimes, the best revenge was simply letting criminals expose themselves to everyone who mattered. What would you have done in that moment? Have you ever had to draw a line with family, even when it broke your heart? Tell me what you think, I really want to know.